Good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome to you, Adibar Khan, Nicholas Bruckman, and Amanda Roddy. It's my great pleasure and a great honor as well to moderate this evening, which is part of the 36th DOK.fest in Munich, an event that is focused on the wonderful documentary movie Not Going Quietly, mainly dealing with Adibar Khan as a protagonist, as an activist, as a family man, I would say. So we are very much looking forward to talking about the movie, the documentary, but we are also very much looking forward to your questions in the audience, because my wonderful co-moderator, Katharina Ahren, is going to be here to take your questions from the chat. So please feel free to send in your questions. I think we will be talking for about 20 minutes in our round here, and then we'll start with the questions. It's my great pleasure really to introduce Adibar Khan to you with just a couple of words. As I said, he is an activist. He's actually a lawyer. He has studied at Columbia University and has been an activist, an organizer. He's nominated, or he was nominated, one of the 100 most influential Americans last year, according to Time magazine. And I can totally understand why, because with this documentary, he is really a very important, not only performer and activist, but also a person that is so much involved with health insurance, health themes, health management in the United States. And director Nicholas Bruckman and producer Amanda Roddy have done a great job in providing that wonderful documentary. Not Going Quietly actually follows Adibar Khan embarking on a national campaign for healthcare reform. The film has received outstanding reviews and was called a shot of pure inspiration, an unusually moving political documentary, and a heartbreaking story, which is all true. And I have to say that I expected to see a very personal story, Adi, but what I actually watched is both a personal story full of humor and tragedy, but also a very public performance of a political activist, a political movement, and a community, I would say. And I think that the documentary is a very rare source and a very special documentary. And there's so many levels to the documentary, the personal story, but also the activism, the political movement, that I would like to start with a personal, actually, and ask you, Adi, how are you today? How have you, Rachel, Carl, and also Willow, who somehow are all protagonists as well, and we see one in the back at the moment. I think Carl is right there behind you. How have you been over the last year? How are you and your closest family members actually dealing with the COVID pandemic? Adi.
Thanks very much for including this film in your festival and hosting this event with us. We're all very lucky to be safe, but it has been a scary time. 3 of my caregivers got coronavirus, as well as our nanny, and because I required 24-hour care, we couldn't fully lock down. At the same time, because I have full-time home care, I get to live at home and interact with my family every day. But I am the exception in this case. Here in the United States, we have not figured out how to provide health care to our people. We have a complicated patchwork system where health care is tied to employment. Private health insurance companies wield massive political power, and so despite the broad public support for a single-payer system as other wealthy countries around the world have it, U.S. health care runs as a per-profit system. At the start of the pandemic, 87 million Americans were uninsured or underinsured, meaning health care was inaccessible even among those who possessed insurance. Around 22 million Americans lost their job due to the pandemic, and as a result, millions also lost their health care during this time. Even good health insurance does not cover the full-time care that living with ALS requires. Because of this, many others with ALS are placed in nursing homes where patients are merely maintained and isolated from their loved ones. To be honest, I don't know if living in a nursing home would provide a quality of life that I would be willing to tolerate. The dark truth is that because of our for-profit healthcare system, many Americans literally cannot afford to live. I am grateful because at home, my 2 kids, Carl and Willow, can climb up onto my lap and we can have conversations or listen to music together. Rachel has been working from home because of the pandemic, and so we get to participate in each other's daily lives. Full-time home care also allows me to work with my team at Be a Hero to fight for a single-payer healthcare system, as well as for home and community-based services, so that my reality of reliable, well-paid, and professional home care is available to all.
Okay, wow, thank you very much, Ady. That was a lot of information, but it feels also very good to hear about your family life during that hard and complicated time, and to see Carl on your lap, I think is something that everybody enjoys. I would like to stick a little bit with the family life, because it is a very important story, but it must have been also very hard to shoot that. So I would like to ask you, Niklas, as a director, how could you deal with that intimate situation? Because from my perspective, it might have been much easier to document the political activism, but the documentation of that intimate family life with a lot of humor, but also tragedy, of course. And we heard about Ady's disease, which is part of the documentary, with the explanation for what is going on is very much there in the story. How could you manage to do that from your perspective as a director?
Yes, thank you for the question. So Ady is what we call here in the US an exhibitionist, meaning he wants to put his whole life on display for others. Not really, but he was initially very, very open always to being part of the film, and even in putting the most dire, often when Ady would be having somebody give him a shower or struggling to use the bathroom, he would kind of signal me like this, come on, we're gonna see something good here. And I think the reason for that, is because, sometimes I think there was humor to it, and he knew it'd be fun to bring us into these very personal moments. But also because I think he knew, as an activist, he was an organizer for 10 years before, and he understood very intelligently this connection between organizing and storytelling. And that when the work he had done prior to healthcare, he worked on other issues around the minimum wage, around immigrants' rights. And part of that work was bringing other people to their representatives to tell their stories, talk about how they had been neglected or in whatever way kind of infringed upon by whatever piece of legislation he was working on. And then suddenly when he was diagnosed with ALS and he confronted this powerful Senator Jeff Flake, the story became his own. And so I think he very intuitively knew that he could make a difference. I don't think he wanted to share. I don't think he wants anybody to feel bad for him. I don't think he wants attention for attention's sake, but I think he knew that by really being public with this in social media, through film, in his book, that it could be used as a tool. And that's what attracted me to Ady about the story in the first place. It was always, when I met him, I'm gonna turn this horrible thing that's happened to me into this weapon, and we're gonna use it against the politicians that are taking away people's healthcare. And that to me as a filmmaker was very attractive, because it was this storytelling weapon that he was building, and documenting that was really, really fun. Okay,
thank you very much. And I think the double storytelling, I would call that, the double storytelling is something that we probably come back to. For the political side, I think, Ady, that the documentary makes quite obvious that the Be a Hero tour, and Niklas, you just commented on Jeff Flake, Senator Jeff Flake, and Ady's confrontation, I would maybe call that, in a plane and conversation that went viral, and I think we'll be talking a little bit about that. The Be a Hero tour was actually possible with a lot of help, in the sense that all political movements need help because they need supporters. But especially for you, Ady, I think it was the case that the active engagement also meant that people were really close to you, and watching the documentary, we get to know your very good friend, Nate, and also Liz, who is an organizer. And I would like to ask you, what was your relationship like with these friends, and how are Nate and Liz doing at the moment? Are you still very, very close, or?
I have a fantastic network of supporters and friends that I'm grateful for. Nate is one of my oldest friends, and I love him dearly.
Okay.
There might be more.
I think
because President Biden made good on 2 promises he made to me last year. Last summer, when Biden Zoomed with me for the final interview of our healthcare series, I asked him directly if he would strengthen Medicare, the United States federal health insurance program for people 65 and older, to include home and community-based services. In the recent joint address to Congress, Biden made a public commitment for a $400 billion investment for home and community-based care services in the upcoming infrastructure package. In that same interview, I asked President Biden that if the U.S. discovers a vaccine first, if he would ensure that no patents stand in the way of other countries mass-producing coronavirus vaccines. And last week, the White House announced that they would support the waiver of intellectual property protections for coronavirus vaccines. Both these efforts were won in large part due to the collective pressure mounted from everyday Americans who demanded that our elected officials keep us safe. In this pandemic, millions of families around the world are grieving because of one stray cough, one brief mistake, one unfortunate moment. Waiving the patents is not only the morally necessary choice, but the logically clear one. We need as many people in the world to get vaccinated, because the longer coronavirus exists, the more variants we'll see. Inevitably, as the coronavirus lingers, we'll begin to see vaccine-resistant variants. Right now, only Europe stands in the way of reaching the necessary consensus at the World Trade Organization to waive the vaccine patents. Germany is the key decider on whether or not billions of people around the world will be able to get vaccinated. According to the WHO, nearly 700,000 new cases were reported in the last 24 hours. We are still in the thick of the pandemic, and we need collective action to bring about its end. Join me and call on your leaders today to waive vaccine patents, because ultimately, no one is safe until all of us are safe.
Okay, thank you very much, Ady. I have the feeling that's also a little bit of the answer to my fourth question that I sent you, and maybe I have to explain to the audience how we organized this, that I sent you my question in written language and that you were able to prepare them, which is great because we can hear your electronic voice. And that was actually another question I sent to you, Ady, because over the time that the documentary covered, your health situation changed very much, and one of the aspects was that you lost your voice, which is really, for a political activist, and a very stressful situation, especially for you with the health condition, but also for an activist, because using your voice is something that makes political activism authentic, right? And because it is such a strong element, the emotional aspect of moving people, motivating others to support your causes, I would like to come back to that element of the voice and ask if you think that the voice of a political activist has to be authentic, or if it can be substituted in a certain way by the supporters that you, in your case, actually had.
Losing my natural voice was a singularly devastating experience, because even when growing up, I leapt at opportunities where I could use my voice, in both activism and in art. By high school, I was involved in theater, speech, and debate, and journalism. I was even named Opinion Czar by my high school newspaper, a title I will defend forever. I often talk about the paradox of my situation. As I lost my natural voice, more people have heard my message. As I've lost the ability to walk, more people have followed in my footsteps. My natural voice may be gone, but my authentic voice has never left me. My eye gaze technology allows me to communicate, but it's not without its own challenges. There are hundreds of things I want to say every day that I just can't get out there. It's horrendous, and yet I am grateful for the tech, because my voice has only grown more powerful over the years as I've built coalitions to advocate for a single-payer healthcare system. So to answer your question, I believe the essence of political activism is the hope we create for ourselves in imagining our collective liberation, and the discipline we pour into making sure that we realize this other world, together.
Thanks. So actually the voice, your natural voice, but also the voice of the supporters is or has obviously been a very strong instrument for this, for your political causes and goals. I would like to ask Nicholas and Amanda, because the documentary is also special in that there has been a lot of recording in a personal setting. We talked about that already in your beautiful house with flowers out in the garden, on the Be a Hero tour with the RV. Some of the scenes very American, I would say, barbecuing with friends. But there's also a lot of social media, and the starting of the Be a Hero tour on that plane is actually included in a way that the viewers see how the whole thing goes viral. So I would like to ask Amanda and Nicholas why or how they came up with using these different ways of documenting what is going on actually.
Yeah, it's an important question actually, because a huge part of the tour was creating these targeted political ads that they would release on social media to grab a lot of people's attention and really start building the movement. And a lot of that too was Liz Jaff's vision, who would get all of us together to make videos at every single stop. And while we were making the documentary, we were also working in two different capacities, where one, we were helping them to make these political ads along the way, as well as going over time and filming with them to capture some of the behind the scenes of the political strategy, as well as actually capturing and then releasing and editing those videos. And we had an editor working full time in our RV, which was accompanying Ady's RV, and he was working like crazy hours to pump out those videos alongside their team. So it was really their brilliance and vision in terms of how they released those videos online and started to build a community. But a lot of the messaging was targeted around Ady's story and how and the work that he was doing to get people aware of the midterm elections that were coming up in 2018, encouraging them to get out and get active and vote, and why they should be outraged in a lot of circumstances and why they should be motivated to vote, because it was important in terms of preserving our democracy. And then it was also about empowering other people to kind of copy that model, showing people that we all have our own stories and we all are affected by certain policies. And if you choose to use your story, it could be one of the most powerful tools you have in order to affect change. So that was I think the model they were putting out there, and a lot of people picked it up, and I think a lot of people felt empowered and excited about actually being able to kind of, you know, stand in their power and take back some of their power. So that's what they did, and it was really cool to watch that, and it was great to make videos alongside them and capture the behind the scenes, which you see in the documentary.
Yeah, great. I only would, I guess I would add one thing about Ady's voice, which I think is interesting from a film perspective, in addition to, you know, the kind of powerful trajectory that Ady just shared. when I met Ady, he had already had ALS for about a year, and he was in this place of having a very limited window. And he says in the film, "I've got a lot to say and not a lot of time to say it." And normally when making a documentary, you kind of spend years developing the relationship or thinking about the story or kind of taking time with it. And then of course, after you go back into the edit room and you look at the pieces of footage that you have and you say, "Oh, this isn't clear. Let me go back and interview the subject, the protagonist of the film again, and pick up those pieces of the story or record voiceover." And in this project, in this movie, we never had the opportunity to do that, which was totally unique for me and my experience as a filmmaker. And at first it was really challenging. All the way throughout it was very challenging because every piece of audio that we use in the film, you can hear where Ady's at in his ALS progression. You can't take a piece from later and put it earlier in the film or vice versa. But because of that, we kind of had to have the cameras on at all times because everything that Ady said, it might be the last time he ever said it. Every interaction he had, it might be the last joke. It might be the only time that we got that moment. And I think that ended up informing the style of the film, which you were talking about a little, which is where we're just kind of rolling at all times, whether he's in the bathroom or he's getting high or he's talking with his wife. And it caused us to shoot a lot, hundreds of hours of footage to make the film. But it was this creative constraint that actually made the film better, much in the way the physical constraint that Ady had made his activism better, you know, of course, on top of all the challenges. So I just think that parallel was interesting from the artistic point of telling the story and what it meant for him to be losing his voice.
Okay, thank you very much. That was really interesting, I think, because you give us a lot of information of the behind the scenes, of course. And the physical constraint is something that I would like to come back to, because maybe I have to comment a little bit on the Be a Hero tour, which has been really successful. You toured with an RV, you toured 30 congressional districts, and a lot of them before the midterm election in the United States in 2018, and a lot of them, and the goal actually was to, I would say, to inform voters about public health issues and how their representatives were positioned on healthcare. And touring through these 30 congressional districts actually meant that a lot of voters changed their minds or were active in voting, and it had been a great success. And that slogan, "Be a Hero," is something that obviously worked very well, but it's also, and now I would get back to the physical constraints and the body aspects and embodiment of effectiveness and settings, because I think that Ady actually in many occasions is a hero himself, because he's using his body with the physical constraints to block somebody off, to be active, to be present. And in that sense, I would like to ask you, Ady, is the heroic something that is needed in American political activism? And how much of the success that you had, because you were really also very heroic and active, but it is obvious that the whole political goal that was achieved in the end was also a success of a solidarity movement, I would say. So what about the heroic in American political activism?
What an amazing adventure that was. The Be a Hero tour was successful because we were part of a wave of millions of Americans who volunteered their energy and passion to together accomplish something amazing, which was the preservation of our democracy. We were united in our resistance to Donald Trump's fascism and knew that a better future was possible if we fought for it. One person, one hero, is not a movement. Transformative change requires millions of people to fight, protest, and demand change for years and years. That's the crux. Heroes are a specific and effective element of American political activism, and frankly all activism, to the extent that they work in solidarity with other civically engaged heroes to build collective power and advance a shared agenda. My story might be compelling to the media, but I know my place. I'm one person joining the chorus for change. I would say that we need help. Our unjust world isn't permanent or inevitable. We can create a better one. We just need more people to stand together and call out injustice.
Okay, we just need, you and us, we all need more people. I think that is an important aspect. Another important aspect that has changed since the documentary was made is that the presidential election took place last year, and with President Biden, and you already commented on some of the most recent developments. I think that some of what you mentioned as your goals in the documentary were achieved in the sense that there's a chance now. So Ady, what do you expect of President Biden and his administration, especially during the global COVID crisis?
What I expect of President Biden and what I want his administration to accomplish are different, but I'm going to answer the latter. The COVID-19 crisis has magnified the injustices in our country and world, so what I hope from President Biden is transformative, systemic change toward a society where everyone is guaranteed good health care, affordable housing, a clean, sustainable environment, a good job with a decent wage, and free education from birth through college. Millions of Americans lost their jobs during the pandemic, and with it their ability to access health care. We desperately need a future in the United States in which health care is not a benefit of employment, but a guaranteed human right. I believe President Biden can make universal health care possible, and I will not stop calling on him to do so until everyone in America has access to care.
Okay. Thank you very much. A lot of expectations. Some of them, President Biden has been called, from a German perspective, a social reformer with what he proposed already. So I think there is a lot of hope in that administration over the next 2 years. I would like to ask Nicholas, in directing and shooting the imagery, were you, because I think hope is an essential element of the documentary, were you very much focused on that element of hope, or is it just something that comes natural because of the beautiful things that we see, also the goals that are achieved, the many people that are enthusiastic, that are motivated? Or was hope actually something that you wanted to portray in a certain sense with your directing of the documentary?
Well, we were definitely following Ady's lead in finding hope in an otherwise very dark situation, namely ALS. But of course, the parallel between ALS and what was happening in our government during the Trump administration and is continuing to, with the obstruction from Republicans and all the challenges that we face globally with the pandemic. And so it was really important. I think Ady led the way with a sense of humor that provides that hope throughout. It's sort of his weapon against the darkness, politically and personally, of what was happening. And so it was really important for me for humor to be kind of guiding light for the film. But in terms of all of the developments that you talk about in the narrative and the political narrative of the film, none of those we knew would happen or could have expected. In fact, most of what happened in the film and what we were fighting against was a series of losses. In the film is about first fighting against the tax bill, which was going to cut into healthcare, and the activists lose that fight. Then the next fight is against the Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who's very conservative justice here. They lose that fight. Then there's the midterms, and it's a small victory, and we recognize that. But I think what the film shows and what Ady's story shows is that each of these fights, each one informs the next. Ady talked about being part of a lineage of freedom fighters and activists in the United States who didn't always win their battles, but passed the torch to the next one. And so that element, and when you see Ady pass the torch to the other activists, like Ana Maria Archila, who's the immigrants' rights and sexual assault survivor advocate in the Kavanaugh fight, you see how each of these little sparks creates the flame that creates change. And that big change of winning the 2020 election really only happens in the epilogue of the film. And of course, that change isn't really the victory. The victory is holding the politicians that we get elected accountable. And that's what we tried to show in the narrative. It's not just about Democrats or Republicans. It's about creating strong social movements that will hold those leaders to account once they're elected. And I hope that's what we really wanted the film to be, a call to action. I think Ady's whole life in many ways and what's happened to him, you can't watch it without feeling like you need to do something, whatever that is, in your life. And so that's how I felt getting to know Ady and making this film. And I hope the movie conveys that to others.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. I think that this is a good time to include some of the questions from the audience, and Katharina is going to do that now.
Yeah, there are already a lot of questions, a lot of interesting questions. So dear audience, please keep on asking questions. You can do that via our website or via Facebook. You're heartily invited. And due to Ady's condition, he's not able to answer right away, but please, we're going to forward these questions, so please, you're heartily invited to ask them. But for now, the first question I have is, one to Nicholas. There's a compliment from one person, and he said he really loves how sensitive you made your film. And I think I also thought it was really, really nice because it's not patronizing. So the question is, how did you manage to not make the film patronizing, but how did you manage to portray it in that way it is portrayed, and how did you talk with Ady a lot about his portrayal, or how did you manage to do that?
That is a good question. There's a big trope in making films or storytelling about people with disabilities that in English is called inspiration porn. I'm sure there's a similar word and an idea in German of like showing people who are disabled as heroes and like kind of trotting them out in order to advance your cause and make people feel bad or advance your agenda. And so we had to be really careful not to do that. And again, I don't think it was anything in the direction of the film that made that possible. It was being really, really, really honest and asking Ady to be really honest about his life and showing him curse and showing him get high and showing the real person that he was, which was not, always this perfect, flawless guy so that you see right now before you. So that, I think, was the approach, was just being authentic in the storytelling. I don't know, Amanda, do you have any other thoughts about that?
I muted myself. Yeah, I think a lot of it is just, it's a portrait of a balanced human being. And I think it's important because to show elements of who Ady is that people could see themselves in as well. So I think that we had to strike a balance between all of the incredible work that he did and does and continues to do with a lot of the difficult moments too that he has to endure with his medical condition, and balancing that out with, him being a father and, being an incredible father, but also struggling with his, declining physical condition and what that means for him in relationship to his kids, and how he kind of evolves to see his relationship with them differently over the course of the film. And I think all of that is important just to showing the scope of a full human being and their own personal journey. And I think that's what we really tried to do in this film, because that's real and that's honest. And I think everyone can see themselves in parts of that story too, because we all deal with beautiful moments, and we all deal with difficult or really painful moments in our lives. And I think that's what makes Ady's story really deep, and I think that's why it deeply resonates with people, because you show the full story. You don't just show the highlight reel or all the perfect moments. You show the full thing.
Definitely, I really liked it when I watched the film that there were funny moments, sad moments. Like, it showed the whole range of emotions there is being a human being. But Nicholas and Amanda, have there been like challenging parts for you? I'm sure there were challenging parts. What was challenging for you when making the film?
Well, emotionally, getting close to Ady and telling the story was difficult, as it is, seeing anybody that you love or care about go through a disease as difficult as ALS. And that wasn't something that I necessarily expected setting out to do. I kind of came in a little bit dispassionately and journalistically, but of course, that objectivity faded away as I got to know Ady and see what he was going through. And so that was really challenging to make the film. And of course, the issues around his voice and not being able to come back and edit the story later or fix it later was really, really hard. And the last piece, I think, has been, and this relates to this humor and hope that's in the film, has really been to market and tell people before they see the film that this is a story of joy and resilience and laughter and hope. The arc of the film is this incredible road trip across the United States. And this takes this classic idea of the buddy movie, of the road movie, going on the road, except in this case, it's not just to have a good time, although they do that, it's to change America. And so I think the biggest challenge is helping people understand what this film is about at its core, that it's actually not a film about ALS, it's not a film about somebody dying, it's not a film about a tragedy, it's a story of hope, as you said. So that's something that we are continuing to think about as we release the film more widely.
Yeah, that's great. I think similar to what Nick had mentioned earlier, just the sense of time, I think kind of was like looming while we were making the film, especially because while Ady was losing his voice, it was difficult not to recognize and be totally cognizant of that. Anytime he was giving an interview to us or was allowing us to capture a verite scene between him and his family, it could have been a private moment, or it could have been a moment that, he was able to chat with someone else or do the work that's so meaningful to him. And so I think, as a filmmaker and capturing a verite film, it's a pretty invasive process and requires a lot of work, requires a lot of time, all of which Ady gave to us at a time where he had limited time left. And I think that definitely weighed heavily on us, and it was definitely something that we had to figure out and strike a balance with. But I do think that, as Nick had mentioned earlier too, that it helped us hone in on the story a little bit earlier on and be a little bit more careful in terms of what we chose to capture. And I think we were able to do it a little bit more efficiently, hopefully. But yeah, that was definitely the trickiest part. And Ady obviously was super generous with his time, and it truly is why I think the film is a much better one, because he gave a lot of his time and showed a lot of his life to us, and I think that's why it's a special film.
I would like to ask another question that is a little bit in line with the last question from the audience, concerning challenges, but also the road movie that you produced. I was wondering, did you just have a second RV, and then when you went to the different places, you just booked 2 places for the RVs, or how is that organized?
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
Yeah. Ady was in an RV with his best friend Nate. They were pretty much, it's mostly the 2 of them in that RV, and then the film crew had their own RV that, followed along closely and parked alongside them most of the time. It was definitely a wild trip, as Ady was alluding to. Yeah, it was a cool experience.
Yeah, they were a lot faster than us. So first of all, Ady was a lot faster than us because he was always zooming around at like 13 miles an hour. So the DP would be like running to try to catch up with him and get a steady shot. But then of course they were doing so much and they were so quick on the tour that like we'd stop and get some gas. And by the time we got to where they were already holding a big protest, and Ady was arguing with the police or something, or some congressional staffer, and we'd be like running to try to catch up. So it was one of those things. You see Ady moving slowly in the film, but actually it was very, very intense and fast-paced shoot.
Okay.
Concerning that, I also have a question. How did you finance the campaign? How did you finance the movie? Were there a lot of volunteers, for example, or how did you find all these people that helped during the campaign?
Yeah, there are different questions about the movie and the campaign. So maybe Ady can talk a little bit about or can write something about the Be a Hero campaign, and we can talk about some of the supporters that we had on the documentary.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, we were very lucky in that we had a lot of executive producers on the film. We had some film finance in the United States is very hard. I'm sure you've heard this from your other documentary colleagues and past filmmakers in the US, where we don't have some of the same ecosystem for funding that the European system has. There's a lot of state funds in Germany, for example. I'm sure there are issues around those as well, but in the US, there's very limited public funding for documentary film. And so this film was financed entirely privately. We had here in the US, there's a system of having a mix of donors who are people who are invested in the cause. So we had people who were around and interested and passionate about the issues in Ady's film, including grant-making organizations, HBO, the International Documentary Association, different organizations here gave us grants. And then we had a variety of executive producers who were all from the Hollywood system and involved in making studio films, but they attached themselves to this movie because they were, I think, passionate about the issues and reforming the healthcare system. And those include the Duplass brothers, Bradley Whitford, a company called Park Pictures, and Patma Productions. And so we were really able to form an amazing team around this film of people who were inspired by Ady's story, but wanted to tell a cinematic kind of narrative style story. And that's how we were able to piece together the funding for the film. But as with any US-based documentary, it's a mix of beg, borrowing, and stealing to make these things happen.
Thank you. Marina from the audience also asks,
The campaign was financed by people who opposed Donald Trump and supported Democrats and support healthcare reform. The campaign was financed by people who opposed Donald Trump and supported Democrats and support healthcare reform.
Great. I stepped over him as he's saying, answering who Be a Hero was funded by, the campaign.
Can I? So Marina from the audience asks, how did you first meet and how long have you known each other for?
So we met Ady in 2018, in February of 2018. And the way was that I was connected to Liz Jaff, who you asked about earlier. And Liz needed to make a political film, a short film, about the campaign that they were launching. And at our production company, we make short films for all kinds of social justice causes, for the Black Lives Matter movement, for Greenpeace and environmental causes. And so we were introduced with the idea of making a very short digital video. But then, of course, immediately upon meeting Ady, realized that there was this feature-length film to come. And that was the beginning of a very long journey of about 3 years making the film.
Thank you. What also was very interesting, and what I also found very interesting, you talked about it already, it was the aspect of the voice. How did you, the first scene is Ady narrating, or his computer narrating what he wanted to say. How, can you elaborate a bit further on the importance of the voice, and did you two talk a lot about that? So did you intentionally plan with making him narrate the story? That's what I found was what was in the movie. I found that he was narrating the story.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think at the beginning, we didn't intend to have him kind of like do a bookend narration of the film, which is what the film does currently. we kind of found that in the process, if we went back and had him narrate the very early days of his life, it ended up moving the story along in a way that was a bit more concise, especially since a lot of the bulk of our verite footage happens post Jeff Flake moment, and a lot of the story that we wanted to tell, which is kind of fundamental in terms of setting up Ady's current story, we didn't have as much material for. So we decided to have him narrate that beginning, and also kind of foreshadow what would come later on. So that's part of the reason why we decided to do the narration.
Related to, this is also the question from Anna. She assumed that the video towards the beginning in which Ady said he can't sleep because he just learned he has ALS was something he recorded himself. She would like to know why he did that.
I think that's a really great question, and one that I think Ady could also probably answer better than us. From our perspective, I think part of it was as like a bit of a time capsule for him to kind of remember at that point in his life. And we were super lucky because that enabled us to have a really incredible view into what was going on in his mind at the time. And in the film, it serves a very powerful purpose, and it's a very powerful moment. But I will, I'll let him chime in too in terms of why he decided to capture those moments. I'll give him a minute.
Yes. It was also therapeutic.
Ady actually captured many, many days of those videos for months after his original diagnosis. But we wanted the movie really to begin with how the diagnosis launches the next part of his life. So that was one of the things that was very difficult for us to leave on the cutting room floor, was seeing him reckon in real time and process that diagnosis. And yeah.
I would like to ask a question that is personal for you two, I think, Niklas and Amanda. I would like to ask you how you think you have been influenced by producing this film with Ady, maybe on a personal level also, because we have been talking about the procedural aspects of it, but have you been personally influenced by Ady as well?
I definitely have been. My life's changed quite a bit since I first met Ady. And you know, sometimes when I think about this film, of course it's about political activism, but I think the film, there could have been another story of a composer writing his great symphony after this diagnosis, or an athlete playing the final game, or a artist, et cetera, et cetera. To me, what was so moving about Ady's story and made me want to tell this film is the way he turns this diagnosis into something so positive, and not just the political activism, but the way he rebounds his relationship with his son and creates this new kind of relationship dynamic with his son. And I shared this earlier with Ady that I had my first son a couple months ago, exact same time as this movie came out. And I, for many years, did not want to be a dad. I thought that I would not be a good dad because I'm so focused on my career and business and other things. And my father, I had issues with growing up, as I'm sure many of us did. And then I saw Ady doing it for years with no physical body, with no voice, building this bond and watching Carl grow to love Ady over years. And and seeing that relationship develop in real time. We spent hundreds of hours filming Ady and Carl together. And that to me was really incredibly moving. And I think influenced my feelings about family, not just about politics.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the question truly overwhelms me because the amount in which Ady has influenced me and, you know, being around him and the people who he's chosen to surround himself with, it's honestly hard for me to like even sum it up concisely, but I think at the core it's probably like, you know, how do you choose to spend your time, and what does it mean to have a life that's well lived? And I think what I've learned most from him is just like life. It's what's really important is like the people who you surround yourself with, how you care for other people, and that care that you get back, and how to receive it. And I think you know, that, you know, finding your purpose in life has a lot to do with you know, finding work and being around people who are meaningful to you and taking care of them. And that's something that he's always done, and I've always admired the fact that he's chosen a career and a life for himself where he truly has, or at least he said he's had no regrets, because he's just tried to make other people's lives better. And that's something that I really aspire to do, you know, in my own life and career, and hope to emulate that. And I think I just feel so lucky that, you know, my job has basically been to learn from him and help tell his story. And that has been such a huge gift for me. And I think I'll definitely be processing this experience for the rest of my life. So it was hugely influential, and I'm very grateful.
Thank you. There's also a question from Lizzo, and she says, thank you for this great film. And she gives props to Ady for his great taste in t-shirts, by the way. And she is curious about how was the film received, and were you already able to tour with it? What are the next plans for the film for the upcoming months?
Yeah, it's been really well received so far. Thank you for that question and compliment on Ady's fashion choices. The movie premiered at the South by Southwest Film Festival in the US, and of course premiered, I kind of put in quotes only because it wasn't that real experience of being in the theater that we're all used to. It was actually supposed to premiere at Tribeca Film Festival last year, and then we had this experience, which again, turning the bad into the good, we used that year and the time during the coronavirus pandemic to continue working on the film and shaping it into the version that you all just saw. And so this is our first time showing the film internationally, but the film will be released in theaters in the US, which we're incredibly excited about, on August 13th. We'll be announcing that soon. It will be on public television in the US, and it will also be released internationally on a new platform from Vice Media called Vice World News, which we will have information to share on soon. And so despite the pandemic and setback, people are really, I think, connecting to the film, and we're really grateful for that. And it's been a very, very tough time to get movies out, and probably a very tough time to program a documentary festival. And we're just really grateful to everybody at DOK Munich for persevering through all of this. I know that the situation in Germany is not great at the moment either. So I think there's a lot of global solidarity now around the movie making experience, and of course every other kind of artistic and connected experience. So yeah, that's the journey we are on right now, and I do wish we could be in Munich, as it was always a dream of mine. I've heard great things about the festival for many years. So next time.
Okay, very excited what's to come. Another question, which is a bit more on the personal level, especially for you, Nicholas. I was wondering if there were moments for you, as we've seen in the film, that it got very challenging from time to time. Were there moments where you thought about, okay, I want to talk to Ady about stopping this campaign or stopping what he's doing, the activism, because I see how challenging it is. Also, it's very powerful, it's empowering, it is great for him. Were there moments where I said, I don't know how this is evolving?
No, I don't think so. Ady was always pushing us harder and pushing everybody around him to go harder. And that dynamic is part of what the film is about. And I certainly never wanted to slow him down. He's like a star, burning bright, burning fast, and we wanted to let him be him. Obviously, there were times we were very worried for him. There's times where I had to help carry him to another room and couldn't film. There was a time where Amanda was with him filming when he got very, very sick and had to be taken to the hospital, and it was a true emergency that we were witnessing, and couldn't be treated like a film shoot anymore. So of course, I think as a documentary filmmaker, you have to make ethical choices. And I think about this a lot with this film, and I'm sure it's something we all contend with as documentary makers is does the ultimate impact this movie going to make merit the choice that I'm making right now as this experience unfolds in real time? And I think Ady as well, tend to take this opinion that getting this story out, whether it's his own activism, capturing this confrontation with this police officer and this Republican and whatever, no matter how dicey it is, it's fucking worth it because we're going to change so many people's lives. We're going to change so many people's minds. I kind of got into that mode making this film. And so was very aggressive about being in the room where things happened. But then when things happen that are real personal crises and health matters came up as they did on this film, I think we all had to take that step back and think about what was happening in the moment. I'm curious to hear what Ady and Amanda have to say about that as well, because they were there.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and I think ultimately it was always Ady's decision too, whether or not the show would continue on or whether or not it was time to pull back. So we, like Nick was saying, I think we always deferred to him because he was in charge in terms of whether or not filming would continue or would not continue. It was definitely his choice, and he kept everyone going like Nick said, far longer than we necessarily intended, but it was all for the best.
Yeah, there were a couple of times where Ady, shut it down, and I think for the protection of his kind of family and for the moment where it was just enough, and there was multiple cameras around. But yeah, I don't know, Ady, when was it too much?
Well, thanks a lot. I have one final question for you. After making such an intense film, and I think we can all understand how intense it actually was on different levels, and you also described the responsibility that you all had over filming and Ady's health, I would say. But after finishing that project, how could you focus on something new, and what was it that you focused on, or is there a new project that you're doing? And I would like to ask Niklas, Amanda, and maybe also Ady, if you have a moment to just share with us your next project. I think it would be wonderful.
Yeah, I'll just share while Ady types that one of the things we're working on now is actually more storytelling around Ady's work outside of the context of this film. I am working on another film, and we're developing more documentary projects, none which will have the same star quality as Not Going Quietly. But in terms of our work with Ady is continuing to do a lot of amazing work, both in terms of pushing for universal healthcare within the United States, as well as in fighting to release vaccine patents to the rest of the world and fighting for global health equity during the pandemic. And so we've been doing a lot of remote short form films that I think can be kind of a companion to the documentary with Ady, where he's been interviewing various celebrities and activists in the United States, including the way he does at the end where he interviews Joe Biden in the film. And so we're kind of making a whole special features, let's say, for the film to come, highlighting the work Ady's doing beyond the end of the film. So that's something that I would really encourage everybody to check out at beaherofund.com.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm also still working on a lot of those Be a Hero videos with Ady. He's doing a current series of really fascinating healthcare conversations with a lot of cool politicians and celebrities in California. which have been really fun to produce as well.
Okay.
Give Ady the
Yeah.
final
My
word.
project is that my son Carl turns 5 years old in a few weeks, and I want to buy him a basketball hoop.
Hell yeah.
Okay.
Did you guys get that?
Thank you so much. I think it seems that you are all still very much involved with Ady. Also you, Ady, which is great because there's a lot to do, I think, and we are very much looking forward to that new material that will be shown. I think that here in Germany, we will also, at Amerikahauses, for example, where I'm the director, we will hope to work with your documentary with high school students, for example, because it explains so much about the healthcare system, about political activism, and it's also an inspirational personal story. So I thank you very, very much for this conversation, for all the information that you shared with us, and of course, especially for your personal insights and your time. And I think we are all watching the movie with the feeling that we see how great America actually can be. And I think that's wonderful because there's so much solidarity, community in your documentary and a lot of heroes that we can focus on. So I hope that all of our audience has seen the movie at least once, the documentary, and might also over the next 2 days, I think, watch it again with family and friends, because I think it is a great documentary for all different ages as well. That's because there are some protagonists that are quite young, like Carl. There's a lot of humor in it, and we can actually learn so much about the political system, but also about family and friends and solidarity. So thank you all so much, and good luck to you all. Good evening, everybody, and
Also,
bye-bye.
thank you a lot on behalf of the DOK.fest München team. Dear audience, if you hadn't had the possibility to get your question answered, you have the possibility to write a message, an email to the film team. Underneath the movie, you see the icon, and then you click on it, and then you can write the film team. And I think Ady would be very happy to receive questions from you. And of course, now I'm going to switch to German. Liebes Publikum, dieser Preis ist nominiert für den Kino-Publikumspreis, gestiftet vom BR und Dreisat. Und über diesen können Sie nach dem Film abstimmen. Und wir freuen uns sehr. Vielen lieben Dank fürs Zuschauen und Dasein.
Okay.
Dankeschön. Thank you so much.
We press our thumbs for you to win the prize.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I'm glad you liked the film and were